SJ, welcome to Mvskoke Radio, your weekly source for tribal and community news, interesting guests and discussions, plus a local events calendar. Ishche, Stongo, Gary Fife, Jaho Jefkidos, Muscogee Radio, Mabu Hedjidowedskis. Welcome to our program. We have the rare opportunity of having our Principal Chief, James Floyd, join us today. He'll be our guest, and we'll be taking your phone calls. If you're interested in asking the Chief a question here, we'll have an opportunity to put one out there. First of all, Chief Floyd, thank you so much for making time in your schedule. We appreciate it. I know your schedule is berserk, but we want to thank you for taking time and coming to speak with our listeners here.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks. It's been a year, I think, about since we were here.
Almost on the head here.
Yeah.
This is your first year in office, 1-4. 3 more to go. Let's just start there. How would you describe it? I know it hasn't exactly been a smooth ride, some surprises here and there, and then a few things you knew that you were going to have to deal with. So how would you describe the past year?
Well, you started out by saying there's 3 years left to go. For me, it's like 364 more days, or a day at a time, because every day is unique. You can plan for things in the cycle of the council of monthly, or you can also at the same time be working on longer range plans, but you have those immediate needs that need to be taken care of on a daily basis. And so my most immediate, I guess, concentration is what's going on today, and then where does that fit into the bigger picture of things that we should be working on and trying to get everybody directed in that area.
Well, when you came into office, there were a number of issues that were huge, shall we say, on the agenda there that had to be dealt with. One, of course, is the healthcare situation. Its budget was out of whack. We're coming up short in so many places, and you had to make some tough decisions. And you did. We're starting to see how it's working out. Let's just start there with that issue. You made some decisions, some things to get things to work. And now, where are we with it?
Well, let's kind of turn the clock back a little bit to about February. I think it took us about 45 days to really get a handle on the financial situation of the healthcare system. It had been operating independently as a department of the tribe and didn't really have the authorities that it needed. And then later in the year, we did pull the administrative functions of the health department under the executive branch, just so that we can, as a cost savings measure and efficiency measure, to make sure that the overhead costs weren't as high, but we could make and implement changes quicker. So human resources, finance, and the administration has come under the executive branch, and that helped. It also took some time to figure out in February and into March exactly what the extent the deficit really was and how we go about addressing that. And so, we did get the support of the council and to seek a loan to get us out of the immediate threat that we had in terms of finances and cash flow. That gave us some room to then go in to renegotiate some contracts that we have, and which is still an ongoing thing. We are working on, as we speak, making sure that our telecommunications costs are down, but we also need to make an investment to make sure that we have the most current, up-to-date phone system and the broadband to make sure the electronic medical records work, and to efficiently deliver prescriptions. And so that takes a lot of what we call bandwidth, and bandwidth takes servers, and when you have out-of-date servers that haven't been replaced, we have to make those investments. And so the time that we had from about March to September was really to get, kind of our feet planted into what we needed to do in terms of cost savings and efficiencies so that we could avoid that issue and lessen the impact that we had to face at the end of the fiscal year in September. In about July, we began sending over to the council the proposed budget for 2017. And we did so with not asking for any more increase in the budget because we felt that under that ceiling of the money that we had and some of the actions that we would be entering into, that we would have the resources available. Now, we've gone through one quarter of the year, and we're looking at our figures financially from the 2 hospitals, and if you count the rehab center, 3 and 4 over there. So we hold 4 state licenses for healthcare facilities in addition to just the money that we have and the agreements we have under self-governance with the Indian Health Service. So the system is not just kind of a one category budget. It's essentially under 4 headings. And each one of those has to make sure that, or we have to make sure that under each one of those that we stay on top of not only the expenditures but the income, the revenue that's coming into the tribe, and balance that out. And so now with the new Secretary of Health, I think that we can start moving a little faster on that and getting that more, diagnosed in terms of details of statements of accounts that we can really manage and make sure that the resources match the demand at each one of our locations because we're spread out all over the nation.
Will we be losing any of those locations? I know there's some concern, and of course, the social media and the water cooler talk that you run across, or even sitting in a waiting room. Are they going to get rid of this? Do they need that? Are there too many bureaucrats up at the top and not enough medical people in the trenches? Those are the questions that I've run across. So I guess to allay those feelings, how would you respond to some of those concerns?
Well, I think that going forward, we don't anticipate anything as we experienced in the end of September. And there we had 123 people that were affected. Now, 3 months later, a majority of those people are back to work, either that we had rehired as maybe other people left, or got jobs elsewhere. So we, kind of passed that hurdle. Going forward, we don't see anything like we saw in September. There is not going to be that. We are going to be concentrating on several things. One, we got the completion of the Okemah Hospital. As I spoke earlier, talked about renegotiating things. We renegotiated that loan, got the fees down, got the terms more favorable to the tribe, got the balloon payment issue settled and out of the way. And so we're on a pretty clear path there now. We're on time, we're on budget. And so, by late spring, provided how the winter weather goes and getting a new road put in there, we'll have that open. But as we open that, where I talked about the data that needs to be examined, is we have to staff to the demand that's coming in, an expected demand. And so as we look at Okemah, what is coming through the doors at the present time in terms of the demand by patients, both through the emergency room and referrals from clinics and specialty care and things like that. And with a new facility, what do we expect that we may increase from both the public and with our citizens in terms of accessing that site for care? So we will staff to that expected level. And I think we're above that at this time, but we're far enough away so that attrition can take care of, and turnover and attrition will take care of that. And I don't think that's going to be a problem. I think the same thing in Okmulgee, that, I think we have a pretty good grasp upon what the demand is, both in the emergency room and both in the inpatient units there. And so, again, it's an issue of making sure that we have enough staff to cover what the demand is in terms of patient load, and of course to make sure that we have the right people there to provide the best quality care. And so those are the things that are being worked on by a number of people on a daily basis and will continue. But in terms of, is there going to be mass layoffs in the future? No, there's not. We've passed that point, and now it's kind of reconfiguring and coordinating in a way that will be most effective for the nation economically and for the patients for quality of care.
Okay, we want to invite our listeners to join in our discussion today. If you'd like to ask the question of our Principal Chief, give us a ring, 918-756-3646. Let's take a couple of quick issues here. As I sit here in the studios of 1240 The Brew, we're seeing the council house there, and it shows a little worse for wear. Got a wall there that wonder whether or not it will collapse, and you can see the cupola has got slats missing and things like that. Where are we with the council house? We've heard talk and seen material about restoration and things like that. Are we happening there?
Right. This one of the priorities when I came in is to restore the council house. As we speak today, restoration, the physical restoration of it hasn't started. However, the contract for the contractor who will be doing the restoration work, and I think some of the design and finish products that are already being looked at. It's a restoration project, and so in restoring the council house, every board, every rock, and everything else is going to be looked at, every brick, because we're going to restore it to where the lifetime of the restoration will be 150 years. And so the firm that we're using has restored several historic buildings in Tulsa, is familiar with the Muscogee area, and have already visited sites where they may even quarry stone if we need new stone. So those things are occurring right now. I believe for sure by March, the public will see physical, changes begin to occur, and we expect that to happen in about, the completion in about 12 to 18 months total. Mm-hmm. Now, we're doing so without having much money from the council. There is a nonprofit that had been in place for the council house years ago that was reactivated so we can accept donations. We're using historic tax credits to help fund the restoration of the council house, and so those things hadn't been done before, but it saves the tribe's resources in doing that, while at the same time provides us with a mechanism not only to restore it, but to keep it maintained once we have it restored.
Now, it seems like it would be a main feature of Muscogee Rising. As the community revives itself, the first thing you see practically is that council house, so you want to...
Right. The importance of the council house can't be understated because, it's the first building in Muscogee, a government building, and so the restoration will be as a government building. And to showcase that period of time, circa, 1878, of how our tribe operated, but will be modernized in a way that we could host, the visits from school children from different schools to come in to see what our government was like. Not so much just to look at the building, but also the sophistication of our government at that time, because how we operate today is very similar to how we operated back then. It's just the technology's changed, and we will have the capability to maybe even hold some committee meetings from the council in some of the rooms, and from time to time maybe even hold a council meeting in there, because it will be restored in the manner to allow us to do that. Now, as we complete that project, and we also take on the visitor center across the street. Those will complement each other. So the visitor center will then be the kind of follow-up project, or I guess, joint project at the same time, so that we have a gift shop, places where people can come to. We have a display area so that artists or writers can have an area that the public can go to, and that we have displays of other things of culture that people need to know about our tribe.
Well, that's a wonderful thing. I was kind of wondering, why are we restoring just a nice building here, and what do we get out of it? So this, answers those questions for me, that it will be a kind of a living, breathing cultural icon here in the middle of Muscogee. Another question that was pending: what about the country club? It's kind of still sitting there, and wondering what's going on there.
Well, hopefully this month we'll have the opportunity to engage with the council about the next steps for the council house. For the country club and the buildings and the land there. It's not going to be a golf course. That won't make the tribe money. There's parts of it that are parceled up right now to buildable lots, and so we pay taxes on that, and that's an expense to the tribe. And we have people who are interested in buying that portion of it and maybe developing, or probably developing that, and so we'll continue to pursue that. I think the next logical step is really to get an assessment of the structure of the building with a structural engineer, and possibly an architect to look at the future of that. We've recently talked about maybe that being the next project we use with historic tax credits, and maybe begin to use it as the cultural center of the tribe, and incorporating the grounds and the building together. But we need to have a discussion with the council, make sure they're on board with that before we go in and engage any firms in reviewing the building and the structural integrity, and the possibility of plans. There's great plans that could be enacted there, and it lends itself to a situation similar to what the Chickasaws have with their cultural center, because we have land, and there's things that we could have there on a daily basis that the public or the tribal members can go out and see and experience. And I think that what we hear from people who want to come to Muscogee is they want to experience the culture.
Sure.
And so that's what we would begin the discussion with the National Council.
Okay, well, we'll keep our eyes open on that one. Now, the next couple of issues I want to tackle here are on the biggie kind of side. First of all, the housing department. We've heard a lot of flap over, the use of waivers for certain people's benefit and this sort of thing. Others just on the street kind of complain that it was awkward and bulky, and things like favoritism and other problems that I'm sure you've probably heard a lot more of than most people. But you've been working very hard to get things kind of leveled out and get them moving, and get it back on track, and dealing with people and providing housing. So where are we now?
Well, as I came in office, we had already experienced an audit of the housing office or housing department from the Housing and Urban Development staff, which I think began in about October or November of 2015. So we had that report, and we had to respond to that report and submit a response to Housing and Urban Development. They did accept that. At one point, there were costs associated with what they determined were weaknesses within the program or violations. We now have that worked out with with HUD, so that the cost is a fraction of what it was before, because we were able to go in and explain what procedures we've now put into place to avoid any occurrence of some of the weaknesses they had before in that program. So we've kind of closed the chapter on the audit. There's still some things that they're, interested in as a result of the audit, and we're letting HUD and those officials just, continue to work on that. With Mr. Whitlow, who's the Secretary of the Housing Department, we're now looking at, okay, what do we do? And that is, what does housing need to do? And that's build homes and put people in homes. So our focus has been on looking at property we own presently, what can be developed, what properties can we buy, both vacant lots and existing homes that could be bought and then made available for tribal citizens through the housing, different programs of housing. We definitely want to make sure that we get the numbers up to begin to work some of the backlog down of people waiting for homes, and that's fairly significant.
Right. Now, we talked to Mr. Bucktrot here at one point. He said, things like rents weren't being paid. It seemed like there were jobs that weren't being done. Monitoring, some supervision, I guess inspections and things, a list of things that I don't recall the whole thing, but have you sent any directives over there? Are you and Mr. Whitlow talking to staff saying this has to be done, this has to end? What form are this, if any, discussions taking?
Well, I guess two things of most importance there is, one, training the staff of how to do the right thing. And not only just the training, but then the hands-on attention that they need so that we practice the things that need to be done correctly. And that's ongoing right now. Mr. Whitlow's had a number of years' experience in housing, and so that's been very helpful to have that experience and worked with other tribes and making sure that we comply. We've got to comply with the HUD regulations, and we're doing that. That does make some changes for people. There's some people who benefited under a system that didn't work right, but there's a lot of other people who could benefit under a system that does work right, and we want to get to that point, and we're moving in that direction by looking at properties, and we will have an opportunity soon to apply for a grant that we could use to build homes. Most of the demand is, I would say, from Muscogee County north. That when you look at the applications that have been submitted over the last several years, the southern region has the fewer number. It doesn't mean that we're going to forget them, but we're going to look at opportunities on the northern end, even though property values are higher as you get to Muscogee and Tulsa County, because that's where more people have requests, more people work in that area, and they want to live in that area. So we're going to be concentrating a lot in that area. Even in Muscogee, we've looked at land in Okemah as well, and possibly buying some property over there to build some homes. And so we trying to take advantage of every opportunity that we have right now to, first of all, have the property, or have people who already own property that want to have a home to come in and talk to us in the housing department, so that we kind of understand the priority of what needs to take place next.
All right. The next subject, hopefully, is a much brighter spot on in our agenda. The Margaritaville finally opened after all this anticipation, bright, glitzy thing that was going on there. Expectations, of course, are quite high for what it can produce. So what do you see so far?
Well, I see that, first of all, we have a very unique product in a very unique market, in a very unique location. And those three things are very marketable to people. I think Tulsa, the River Spirit Casino, I believe, is only one of two tribally operated casinos within a city limits on a river in the United States. And so we want to make sure that people understand that if you come there, it's going to be different. And when you walk in the doors, it is different. It's not the drab grays and reds and blacks that you see in casinos. You have bright colors, and it's almost like you're going onto an island, and it's very clean looking. There are areas that you can go into, the food establishments that are outside of the casino, so it's accessible to all the public, and it's in a smoke-free environment. And then you can go into the gaming area, We have the a state-of-the-art theater for the entertainment that will be beginning, I think, this week, actually. The first one was, I believe, January 6th. And so those components will all be online. We also we will have the only Ruth Chris's steakhouse in the state of Oklahoma. And already we've had a tremendous amount of interest from people to want to use it for business meetings. It has the capability of holding, small business meetings, and has overhead projectors and things like that could be utilized at the same time of having dinner. I've looked at it myself. It's extremely high quality. It's going to attract people itself, and so I think that the tribe is positioned to attract a wide variety of individuals for various interests, whether it be just to stay there, eat there, to go to gaming, go to concerts. Just through the experience of the Margaritaville, we got the spa that's going to be coming online soon. So, it's a destination location, and I think it's a very unique property in the fact that we're right in the city limits of Tulsa.
We're seeing its marketing campaign really taking root now. Now, let me ask you a related question, one that affected our department and sort of raised the hairs on the back of a lot of our necks, was that when the most recent ribbon cutting took place, we weren't notified. We were sent an email to old addresses. One was sent to mine, and I was, on leave. And then a phone message was left with our manager, who was also on leave, and said he would be. So we were pretty much left out of the loop. And this is the main venue for our people, the stakeholders, the people who made that casino happen through tribal sovereignty. What can we do to fix that? I mean, that was something that really upset our team.
Right, and I understand that. And Sterling Cosper and I will be meeting this afternoon and talking about that, because as the tribe begins to be more decentralized, so you have for-profit entities, and gaming is one of those. They have their own public relations office. The tribe has their public relations office, and then we have an independent media. Those all have to be linked together, and so the traditional sources of going to one person and saying, hey, tell me what's going on, we're going to get notified at the same time that you will. And we got an email just like you got. So we have to make sure that we, are tuned in to the different sources that are going to be generating press releases and events, so that everybody knows and everybody has a chance to be there, because it's something we want to highlight. It's not something we want to make a negative event out of. And we did have the Office of Public Relations there, and I think most, if not all, of the local media outlets in Tulsa.
Right, the Tulsa market.
Unfortunately, I couldn't be there. I was at a funeral and couldn't attend that. But, it is a positive event, and we will have more of those in the future. And so I think this afternoon in the discussion is, okay, we need to make sure that that network is in place so that people all have that information available to them.
Marvelous. We'll be looking forward to that, because it is a wonderful time. I had a good time at the original ribbon cutting, and thought this is going to be a nice story to cover on a continuing basis. But darn it, you got to tell us.
Yeah, and I think there will be some good stories. I mean, some great acts will be there, and I think that's stories in themselves.
Let's move on to another subject, tarot. It was set up to make sure that Muscogee vendors and citizens were employed and got contracts and things, but we're seeing that not working, and the council is reforming an approach there. What's the future there?
Well, the near future is this afternoon. I'll be talking to the speaker, because I've not signed the bill they passed in December. It's still on my desk, and I have some concerns about that. And so, to be honest about it, there's several choices. One is to not approve it and send it back to the council with suggestions for approving, amending it. Or that we amend it from the executive branch and send over an amendment probably bigger than the package that was approved in December. The intent is that we have mechanisms, that we have good criteria in place to select Creek and Indian-owned businesses, and in businesses that are going to do the best work for us and employ Indian people, Creek and other tribal members. And so there are several things. I think, in addition to, I think the authority from the National Council, we will have that discussion today, whether the authority is sufficient enough so that the executive branch can then go into the details of the policies and procedures we'll follow in making sure that we have that. One of the things that concerns me greatly is that we define the business as being 51% Indian owned. They can go in and get preference to get a contract, but we're absent any language of the ability that they have to carry out the job, or whether they get the award and turn around in an hour and subcontract that out to a completely different company that may not employ any Indian people. So what have we really gained there? And what cost effectiveness have we had and quality have we had in the project? Those are the things that we, at the end, if we, let's say the country club again, let's say we utilize somebody to go in and restore that, we want to have a quality product, and we want to have it at a good price, and we want to have it on time. So those things are not yet defined, and so hopefully by the end of today we'll know where we stand on what we will do. It was apparent that Tara was not working, and kind of had an exclusive group of contractors that seemed always qualified. But at the same time, I've heard from a number of people, some partial owners in companies, they don't own the 51%, but they're Creek citizens, and these companies employ Creek citizens. They want jobs as well, but they're locked out with the present wording that we have. There's got to be room for more people that are Creek in this bill.
You mentioned the owners and some of the vendors, problems there. Of course, reporters hear all kinds of things in the wind, and we're hearing favoritism in the awarding of contracts to political buddies, shall we say, minority fronts, people who would dangle their Indian out front, say, see, he owns this, we're Indian owned, and then actually not being a native company, it was a non-native. So are we going to see any actions in those areas to kind of give us some safeguards there?
Well, the bill that was passed does define that they must be active managers. They can't be passive owners in a company and then pass it on to somebody else and just get an award for the sake of having an award, because that's going back to what we had under Taro. And so we've got to make sure that we strengthen those provisions going forward. Fortunately, we've not made big awards recently because we've not had big projects. Even here at the council house, we will be doing that through our One Fire company that the tribe, it's a component of the tribe. And so we can have more security in knowing that, that's an Indian-owned company, and we have more control. We need to have that described and the criteria defined in a better way so that when we do go out for solicitations, we know that we're getting the best price, that we're getting the best quality, and we're getting the best people to do it, which are Creek people and Indian people to carry out the work.
Right. By the way, folks, Taro was Tribal Employment Rights Office. If you would like to ask a question of Chief Floyd, give us a call here. We've got some time left. Give us a buzz here at 1240 The Brew, 918-756-3646. We've seen an issue pop up lately that has the potential for really being one that's going to aggravate a lot of people, involving stomp grounds. Restrictions, shall we say, or prohibitions or limits on whether or not stomp dances can be performed on tribally owned grounds. Of course, a lot of people have just heard part of that and taken off in some wild, kind of vicious feelings and thoughts like, you got no blankety blank business telling us where and when we can hold a stomp dance. And I understand it kind of came out of a seminar on indigenous rights and things like that. That's when we first heard it. So maybe you can take a second here and kind of clarify from your point of view what we've got and where we're going to go, because we're going to come back to this subject and hopefully we'll get some Micos in who discuss their points of view and let our citizenship. But, where did that come from? I mean, and why, I guess?
Well, let's go back to the fact that, what occurs under the Micos in the grounds, and their, I guess, a historic authority to regulate their grounds and what occurs on their grounds, and the sacredness of what they do, and the respect that needs to occur on our grounds. And then I think you mentioned several, scenarios where people making, kind of conjecture about different things. Kind of all pieces of that have some reality and truthfulness in it. The center of this are the Micos themselves. And there is, as we speak, they're organizing a meeting of the Micos to talk about how they want that, how they want dances to proceed that are off the grounds when the grounds are not open. And I think it's a very real issue that we need to deal with, because on the grounds they can regulate who has cameras, who has recorders, and the types of dances that occur. Off the grounds they can't. And we know, we already have evidence that people have recorded and filmed and taken some of the dances that I wouldn't, any type of dance that we had performed in public, and then they use that kind of out of context, way out of context sometimes, of what its intention would be. The solution, I think, is somewhere in the middle. We know that that we have a kind of tenuous situation in regards to the future of the grounds. We want people to come to the grounds, and the Micos want people to be at the grounds and participate, because that defines us as who we are as Muscogee people. And so we know also that we have people who can't come to the grounds. There are people in the urban areas of Tulsa and Oklahoma City that just can't come to the grounds. Some of them don't know where the grounds are. And so how will they be able to initiate and carry on traditions of dancing and instructing people of dancing, or having them be interested in going to the grounds when the grounds are open to participate? So, there's a lot of factors involved there, and I think that we'll see a resolution of that here shortly. But, it originated from the need to make sure that we preserve what we have, preserve the sacredness of some of the ceremonies and dances, while at the same time having the ability of people to have kind of the exhibition type of dances. And so I'm hopeful that within the month they'll have a meeting and we can get this resolved, and everybody can be satisfied with what policy that we will follow as a nation.
Oh, I remember this issue popping up among the Cherokees decades back, where people who ran the grounds and organized the dances did not want to see educational performances, and a young man was doing precisely that, taking them off and making it clear that this was not the traditional religious performance, that this was there to educate our non-native neighbors, our own young people, and the state of Oklahoma pretty much, that this is what it is. This is what it looks like. We don't all powwow. We don't put on fancy feather outfits and have a drum in the middle with a bunch of guys, singing their traditional song. And I think it's still kind of bothers some people there that these things happen. Now, does this figure into what we're talking about, the educational aspect? Does that collide with the traditional feelings there?
We hope that it won't. And I think that, the Micos have heard from some of the educational programs that have conducted, classes on introduction to our cultural activities, which go even beyond the grounds and dances. And some of them had put together very good programs. I, have knowledge of several that are very complete, and there are components that deal with that. And some of them have invited Micos to be speakers at these sessions, or to be present to talk to young people, because the young people do hold the future of the strength of the grounds. And as myself, as I get older, it's harder, and we need to make sure that to carry on our traditional beliefs, that we have them interested in coming to the grounds, and for the right purposes. And so they need to be exposed to what that is in some manner. And at the same time, what obligation do we have to the public or to our citizens who live outside the Creek Nation or in urban areas that want to learn that?
I've heard a lot of people actually echoed what you just said. We don't have the time, or it's too far, or I don't even know where this ground is, kind of thing. And that's understandable. But we're not living in the same day and age anymore when these traditions were founded. And perhaps this is a logical outgrowth or an outreach, perhaps, to our own people to deal with this. I guess the final question in this vein, then, does this blur the lines, separation of church and state kind of thing?
Well, I think I don't know if it blurs the lines, but I think the sense that I've gotten from all the leaders, both church leaders and grounds leaders, is respect. We should also respect the history of our churches, and we have churches that are, I've been at locations that are celebrating 115 years, 130 years. We've had some over 150 years. And you hear the leaders of some of those historic churches share concerns about their declining membership as well and participation, because it takes time, and they're in rural areas and in a number of cases, and it's just that commitment they worry about. The same things can be said with the grounds. We established the grounds as soon as we got here in 1830s, and where are we going to be in 20 years? The Micos, are we identifying those people who will be the leaders in the future? And it's just the same way with the churches. Are we identifying those people who will make the commitment to carry on the traditions that have been the strength of us? I mean, me personally, and will that be there for our children and grandchildren? That's the bigger question I think that we have. And how do we do that? How do they do it independently of the tribe, and how they do it with the tribe? Because you have to have that partnership in some way.
That's a subject we will revisit at some point here on Muscogee Radio, and again, offer a call in. So if you would like to ask a question of the chief in the time we have remaining, give us a call, 918-756-3646. Let's shift gears one more time. Flying T, how's it doing, and what do we make off of it? Is it just rent, or do we have a percentage of their business? How does that work out?
I think at the present time that I've seen, it's rent. We get a monthly rent. Having an equity stake in that business, we will get more revenue if they expand. And so, hopefully, from what I understand in the last meeting that they presented it, there is interest from other locations to kind of branch that or franchise it, so to speak. And then we begin to get that return much more than just the rent. The agreement presently is rent for a number of years. And so that's where we stand there. It is busy. From all things that we have heard is that, and seen is that, people want to go there. It's a different concept than they've had before. We hope that it can sustain, that uniqueness over a period of time. With, again, our other properties in Tulsa, how are they going to complement each other, and how are they going to link together and support each other? If they can do that, it will be, then in improving and increasing the revenue to the tribe. But right now, it's just rent that I've seen.
Okay, another business opportunity right there is Riverwalk. I haven't heard anything about it actually, but it's not saying much. But is it being filled? I mean, last time I walked by it, there was a lot of empty storefronts. The Mexican restaurant was there, and I understand an art gallery, a school is there. But otherwise, how's that business opportunity working out?
Well, the last report that we had from One Fire was that we're about 98% committed to the space. I guess if we had an anchor tenant, it would be the company that's going to come in, the pizza company that will be there, and that should open in the spring. There's a coffee shop there, a salon, and as you go in now and look at it, the office spaces are being filled. We have a law firm that's rented space, and so some of the Class A office space now has also been rented. And so it's taken, I think, a while for it to take off, but we're getting rents out of it, and we will continue to do that. We will continue to have it as a fee property and not put into trust, as I see it in the near future, because in terms of private businesses, they want to see that in terms of investment as opposed to being on trust property. And so we have an agreement with the Jinx Police Department and with our Light Horse that we make sure that we have the proper police and fire coverage that's needed for that property. They have done some renovation work. They will continue to do that, invest in the buildings themselves. And so, I think as we get into the springtime, and if you go back up and visit it today, even you'll see more activity than what you may have seen even 6 months ago.
Okay, well, I've never stopped there in over a year, I think, so it's about time for me to check it out. Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned the police and agreements working out there. That was kind of a thorny issue under the last administration with local jurisdictions canceling whatever agreements they might have had, including here in this town, Muscogee, in the county here. Have we reestablished those relationships formally now? Do we have cross jurisdiction or something to that effect?
We do. We've made progress there in having more agreements with both municipalities, cities, and counties. We're still working on the one in Muscogee County, and hopefully that will be done soon. We do have the one with the Tulsa City Police. We're working with the sheriff in Tulsa County. And then you can kind of begin to look at others. Hughes County, I think we've got that one taken care of, and McIntosh County. So we're seeing cooperative, policing going on within the Creek Nation. It's making our staff, busier in that regard. But we're also seeing that we're being involved with different task forces that are going on within the Creek Nation, whether it's a drug task force or opportunities for us to participate in water rescue efforts, search and rescue efforts, and things like that, that really bring more experience to our officers and help us as a light horse administration carry out its work in protecting our citizens. And so, it is progressing. We will be probably having a bill with the council this month on our Tulsa division, because the light horse is split up in 3 divisions: north, central, and southern. The northern division now includes River Spirit, and so with the increase in business there, we've increased the police presence, but they also have to respond to calls in Tulsa, parts of Wagner, and a little section of Muscogee County and Creek County. So they hold that different, that northern section, and we really have to have a substation in Tulsa just because of the volume of police work that's going on in that northern division.
And it probably will rise even as Margaritaville expands and draws more of a crowd. Kind of another related subject, and one that happened, an incident happened before you were in office, was the second chief, Mr. Barnett, got busted with his hands, fingers in the till, to an extremely large amount. The only thing we heard was federal prosecution there, I believe. Is there going to be any follow-up from the tribe, or is this a done deal and just let it go?
Well, I think the former second chief, is released in February this year. He, as I understand it, part of the sentencing is that he has to repay the tribe, but the tribe's liability insurance reimbursed the tribe for what was taken. And so we did recover the funds through the insurance company that's, that covered tribal officials. And so, efforts that are going on with other aspects of the nation in what, people may be looking at is done through those agencies and not directed by me or have my involvement, because you never know where those begin and end or where they stand. And so, if something's found, we've submitted cases to the Attorney General of our own tribe, and we found things that we felt that were improper or illegal, and let the tribal prosecutor look at it. Federal would have to include other federal officials.
And there would be no influence from the chief's office then?
No, sir. Not on the law enforcement part. I'll let them do their job that they're trying to do, and if they think they found something and they're going to take it to a prosecutor, then they'll let me know.
Let the system work.
Yes, sir.
In the last few minutes we've got here, let me ask you one that has national implications. We're seeing a brand new president being elected in a matter of days. His early history was, let's say, anti-Indian. Let's call it that. He questioned people's racial heritage, gaming enterprises, and whether or not they were being influenced by organized crime. And he leveled some pretty nasty charges. And now we're seeing his administration forming. We've got a new candidate for Interior Secretary. National Congress of American Indians say, well, let's see, maybe this might be a brand new opportunity. And didn't really, their executive director really didn't push it beyond that, but he's kind of leaning toward Trump is what my impression was. What's yours? What do we see? Is there anything for us, perhaps?
Well, I've had several meetings in Washington since the election, and in the last one with some members of the transition team dealing with Native American affairs, and there were about 200 tribal representatives in attendance. And I think it ran the gamut from recognizing the need to maintain all our sovereignty, our government-to-government relationship, which is very important. Those are, the essentials that we have to have, to lessening some of the regulations on natural resources, particularly when you look at the northern tribes, particularly in Montana and Alaska, where there's reserves of coal and oil that they'd like to get to that they can't right now. So during that meeting, tribal representatives and leaders could speak about what they would like the new administration to concentrate on. And my takeaway from that is, natural resources is going to be a big deal. For us, it may not be. Our drilling history is, kind of already happened. And, with our land base, natural gas may be the thing that we're, I guess, more in the forefront for us, as opposed to timber and fishing and other things of other tribes. And so from that meeting, I know there was a lot of note-taking and recording of going on of the statements, but now, in 10, 15 days, we'll see as the new administration goes in exactly what will happen. The House is in session this week, and I wanted to make sure that our legislators, congressional people, knew that if you repeal the Affordable Care Act, you've got Indian health authorization that was made permanent that needs to be preserved. And so, Congressman Cole understands that, Congressman Mullen understood that, and so I know they understand that. We just need to make sure that it's protected and isn't discontinued in any action that they take. And so I'm watching that almost hourly to make sure that occurs. There's also veterans authorities that are there. So, we have over 600 tribal veterans, and we want to make sure that what they receive in terms of either health care or benefits under the Affordable Care Act is also preserved. And so I wanted to make sure that, again, congressional members understood that, hey, this is my interest right now to make sure that these things do not go away. But we'll see what happens there. Health care is going to be the big issue that I see right now. Others, feel that, we got Supreme Court issues coming up, appointments. We got cases going before the Supreme Court. So how that plays out and affects us is, big question mark.
Okay, of course, things like the EPA. One of the discussions some months back was the possible candidate for Interior, and Governor Fallon's name came up. And the Intertribal Council wrote a letter endorsing that nomination, saying, we were behind her. As usual, in all political subjects like that, you have pros and cons from people who thought it was a good idea and then others who absolutely hated it. I mean, we heard some of that. And the ITC, made its move. One of the criticisms was there was absolutely no consultation with the membership. How do you react to those criticisms?
Well, I think you have somebody who will, in that case, potentially transition from one role into another. The Interior appointment is very important to the 5 tribes. We know that. We represent over 750,000 members. And so combined, we're the biggest tribal bloc in the country. So, and you had somebody from Oklahoma being considered, and that's somebody that we've worked with before, but we'll work with in the future. And we wanted to make sure that we didn't take a stance that was opposing it, because regardless, we're going to have to be working with Mary Fallon in either capacity, and we play a prominent role. So you want to make sure that it's somebody that you have access to and that knows that you can provide input into the policy. And I think that's what was driving that. Ultimately, she didn't get the appointment, went to somebody else, and we'll see where that goes.
Right. In the last 30 seconds or so we have, you want to make a final thought, sharing something with our listeners here, something on your mind?
Well, there's, I guess the final thing is, there's a lot of things going on. I think in the first year, as we began, as we ended the calendar year, we did get the bill through for the 18-acre transfer down at the Fountainhead property. I've already spoken to the Corps of Engineers. It's in trust. Now we've got to work out the transfer agreements. We've got the Feed a Trust application with the Interior. We're hoping that about January 20th we have that. And then we want to go to work, and what's that property going to do for us? What do we want it to be? And continue to work on other opportunities that arise. I think there's a lot. We just need to make sure
Right.
what's going to be most beneficial to us.
Okay, Principal Chief James Floyd, we want to thank you so much for talking with us today, and we'll have you back and we'll do it again, I hope.
Okay, sounds good, Gary. Thank you very much, and thanks to all the listeners out there today.
Okay, Mado, thank you for
You
listening
got
to Muscogee Radio. You've been listening to Muscogee Radio. Join us again next week for more local, tribal, and community news and updates. Mado.